Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hoops HQ Show, our inaugural episode. I am Seth Davis along with Andy Katz. There's a lot to break down on the world of college basketball right away, Andy. No slow start for the Hoops HQ Show. We're going to get to all the action, all the big headlines on the court, especially a very action-packed weekend. But first, unfortunately, we have yet another off-court scandal, if you will, to talk about in a bombshell indictment coming down from the Eastern District of Pennsylvania about gambling. And gambling is a big theme, not only in college basketball, but throughout the sports world, as legalized sports betting has come to America very quickly over the last few years. But this indictment charges 26 people, accusing 39 current and former college basketball players of manipulating over 29 games. 17 former players were listed as defendants. 4 are current players at mid-major schools, mid-major, low-major, including guys who've played just within the last few days leading up to this indictment. 17 schools impacted, only one from a power conference, that's DePaul. It's worth noting that 2 of the people who are at the very center of this controversy, this conspiracy, which started with the Chinese Basketball Association and then migrated over into college. Same 2 guys who were involved in that case involving the NBA, Chauncey Billups in a poker ring, Terry Rozier. And really the common thread here, Andy, is that they are being accused of manipulating these sort of low rent bets, prop bets, first half totals, things of that nature. These are not games necessarily against the spread, full games against the spread, prop bets and the like. And so these are called low liquidation markets. We're learning all of this terminology kind of here on the fly. But, you know, it was a big news, not only, Andy, because of what happened, and it's very important to note that an indictment is a one-sided accusation. Everybody is entitled to the presumption of innocence. But it's not just describing what allegedly happened with these conspiracies and these text messages that these guys are sending to each other, but the larger topic of legalized sports betting and how it's infiltrated every corner of the sports industry, including the media, which we are definitely going to get to. So a lot to tackle here. What's your main takeaway from this bombshell of a story?
All right. Well, first of all, Seth, I don't compare this to what happened with the NBA because you've got a current head coach, and I know it wasn't point shaving, but it was involved, with illicit
games,
gambling, if you will, poker games. So, like, to me, that was big time news that you had an absolutely current active head coach taken off the sidelines and a player and a former player at the NBA level. Look, I've covered the point shaving for a long time. I was a beat writer in Fresno State when me and Adrian Wojnarowski were there, and there was point shaving allegations in Fresno. I just think at this current point, it's 2 things can be true. It's a big story. Obviously, any kind of manipulation of any kind of game, and that means men's basketball. It could be some of this tennis fixing that goes on, match fixing that we hear about around the globe with tennis, which tends to be a little bit more easier, if you will, to fix because it's one player versus another player. But in this case, you've got so many red flags. I mean, I'll be honest. I just think it's absolutely just some of the dumbest stuff I've ever heard to think that anyone would think that you could get away with prop bets or any kind of bets like this on these random games involving low major teams, for hundreds of thousands of dollars, any kind of money put on these kind of games, it's going to draw a red flag. And that's why there are protections in Las Vegas. And there's now AI algorithms to look at, whoa, something jumps out at you that can really raise the flag. And so obviously the law followed up on it and they did it appropriately. And these people potentially, obviously, could be facing prison sentences or fines or who knows. So, I do think that any legislation from congressional on down on prop bets should definitely go forward. I think it's ridiculous to bet on things that are really specific to a player, to how many free throws you make, all these kinds of things that really can contribute to potential irregularities and illegal behavior. If you want to bet against the spread straight up, this team's favored by X amount, well, are they going to win or not? Fine, whatever. That's not for me, but I have no problem with everyone else doing it. But to really get it down to these actual, like, over under on the half, on how many points this team's going to score, how many players are going to make these many free throws, it just opens up to so much morally corrupt behavior that these players, unfortunately, were subject to and have gotten caught.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you said. I mean, I think that it's very important to educate college athletes, everybody really, as much as you can. These are multi-million dollar, billion-dollar companies, and it's a huge industry. They are very invested in the computer science of this at catching any type of regularity. I do think that this is an important education for everybody, and that can maybe focus, the NCAA, which has its own unit and efforts to investigate things like this. I actually think it's probably pretty good news for college sports that it was happening at such a low, mid-major, low major level. This is not Cooper Flagg fixing a Duke game against Kansas. This is not the CCNY scandal of the 50s, a team that, was one of the best teams in the country. So there's a lot to try to fix. And, there's a lot of harassment that also goes on. Let me just wrap this up with this, Andy, because I see people on Twitter blaming Scott Van Pelt because he does a bad beats column, and all of these media companies that take money from the gambling companies, the DraftKings, the FanDuels of the world. I think people need to be very careful about being holier than thou. And I can tell you, we're a fledgling media company at HoopsHQ. I saw some people on Twitter saying, "Oh, well, we're not going to take any money from gambling companies." I'm thinking, good, send them to us, because this is a very challenging time in the media business, and these are content companies. I mean, FanDuel is producing NBA games. It's being broadcast on these regional sports networks, and that's its whole different kind of area. So to just deny that this is a multi-billion-dollar, go worldwide, multi-trillion-dollar industry, this cat is out of the bag. And so we need to educate ourselves, and we all need to kind of check ourselves. I will tell you, at HoopsHQ, I do a picks against the spread column. We have Jason Lockenfor and Ben Hall. They do some analytical gambling coverage as well. We will not do any prop bet picks at HoopsHQ. We will do games. We will do over-unders. We'll do some futures. So we are regulating ourselves in that regard. But I'm just saying, this is a huge, huge area. Fantasy sports, NCAA bracket challenges. I think people need to be very careful about being holier than thou about this. It's here to stay, and it's an important investment in sports all around. And we need to be as smart as we can moving forward. Real quick, Andy, I'll let you have the last word.
Real quick, I just want to say that the blame lies with the people, if they did this, that did it. End of story, period. You're not supposed to fix a game. I don't care what sport it is. So don't give me, oh, well, if they were getting paid, this wouldn't have happened. No. There's a moral line.
Well said. And if the morality doesn't guide your decision, then I hope the practicality does. Again, if there's any type of irregular betting patterns are going to be picked up, this is going to be a big time topic. We will continue to cover this on the HoopsHQ show and over at hoopshq.com. More to come on the show after this. All right, welcome back to the HoopsHQ show. Seth Davis, Andy Katz with you. Going to play a little game called Hot and Not. Some big brand teams making moves in totally different directions. Let's start with the Kansas Jayhawks. A huge win at home, a convincing win over Iowa State, and then a dominant win over Baylor as well. Not surprisingly, coinciding with the return of Darren Peterson, although they had lost two of their previous three, including at West Virginia, UCF. A lot of talk that Kansas is just not very good. Andy, to me, this, it seems almost too easy to say, well, they're playing one way without Darren Peterson. He comes back. They should be a lot better. These things take time to reintegrate him. As great as he is, we know he's a great individual player. It takes time to get him learning to play with those other players as well, especially impacts at the defensive end, where this team had been playing amazing championship level defense before he came back. And by the way, it's also the coaching staff and Bill Self trying to figure out how best to use him. He's an elite scorer, not much of a playmaker, so let's get him off the ball. Let's get Melvin Council on the ball. I think Kansas is a sleeping juggernaut. I know they fell out of the rankings after the loss to West Virginia. I'm sure they'll be back in next week. I think Kansas is national championship good if Darren Peterson stays healthy.
Yeah, and look, he's maximizing his minutes. I'll just say this about Kansas. They're going to be the classic example of a team that will be seeded to their record, not their talent. And they're going to come up against a top 4-line seed earlier in the tournament than normal, and that team's not going to want to see the Jayhawks. All right, for my team that is on the not, I'm sliding to another blue blood, and that is North Carolina. Shout out to the 3 newbies in the ACC, because SMU, Stanford, and Cal, within the last 2 years joining the ACC, they took down the blue blood all at home. A signature win over the last couple of weeks against North Carolina. Not able to beat Duke. That's okay. At least you take down one of the two. Shows you belong. And Carolina, we know they've got unbelievable individual talent. Did great in the transfer portal. But defensively, that's where that flag is raising red high right now, because they're giving up, way too many points, well over 80, 90 in these games. That's just going to be really difficult for them if they're going to compete the top 3 in the ACC, let alone they could be a little bubblicious as this continues. And they got a very tough game coming up at the end of this upcoming week at Virginia. So I'm going to segue myself to the hot one. And hey, the Red Storm is back. We were quick to dismiss them because they were really struggling, certainly in their peer-to-peer games, their elite games, point guard issues. And guess what? You just give Rick Pitino time with this group, and look what has happened. Now, they have benefited. I will qualify that the league is not as strong as we thought. But you know what? They're beating the teams they're supposed to right now, and especially on the road. At Butler, at Creighton, you beat a bad Marquette, and you win at Villanova. That's 4 wins in a row, 3 or 4 on the road, which is pretty significant for St. John's. And it's setting up to where, it's going to be St. John's, UConn for number 1 in the Big East, which is kind of what we thought at the beginning of the season. Didn't look that way at one point, but now we're back to where those are the 2 that are going to compete for the Big East title.
Yeah, he made a lineup change. He moved Dylan Mitchell into the starting lineup, made him bigger, made him better defensively, and he's an outstanding passer, which also helps alleviate the point guard issues. Who knew that Rick Pitino was a good coach of basketball? So we should have known better than to write this team off as quickly as we did, especially as you point out, the league being what it is. As far as a not team, North Carolina State, I was courtside in Raleigh for their loss at home to Georgia Tech. They had come in without any quad 1 wins. That was a quad 4 game, and they now have a quad 4 loss. I know you saw them, Mal. You've made this point, and I want to speak specifically about Darian Williams. Will Wade had that mini tirade at his press conference a couple of weeks ago in Darian Williams' defense. I asked him, was that instinctive in the moment, or was that calculated? And he admitted it was 100% calculated, trying to talk to the player. And if you have to talk to your best player like that, then you have a problem. I saw it firsthand. Darren Williams seems like a nice kid. He's a good basketball player. It's a classic case of the challenge of going from being the number 3 guy on your scouting report of the other team to being the number 1 guy. And you take all that money. He was ACC preseason player of the year. It's not that he doesn't have the skills to be that guy. He doesn't have that mentality. He is not an alpha. I saw it with my own eyes. And they are in very real trouble of not making the NCAA tournament because they are not a good defensive team. There are a lot of quad 1 opportunities in the ACC. That is definitely different. And good on Damon Stoudemire and his group off a 23-point home loss to Pitt. North Carolina State is in trouble.
I don't think they're going to make it. I was shocked that he was the preseason ACC player of the year. That came out of left field to me when he won it. So, I agree with you totally. The pieces don't fit.
Yeah, and that's we talk about the money trap. You can afford to get a player, but you look at Will Wade. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but he'd have been much better off, bringing in a couple of mid-major dogs with something to prove that nobody knew and using that money that way. So, lesson to be learned forward. Okay, moving on hot. How about the Florida Gators? The way they've turned things around, especially that win at Vanderbilt. And again, we flush. I feel so bad for these kids because of what people like you and me do to them. Xavier Lee is a guy who came from Princeton, was a great player at Princeton. Of course, it's going to take him time to adjust to playing at that level in that role and going to a team that not only won a national championship, but won because of the guards. He had his best game as a Gator, given the circumstances and the setting. Their front court is so amazing at what they do, and I definitely think that they have righted the ship. And of course, they had a jersey snafu. He wore number 99. Todd Golden afterwards joked, "Well, maybe he should still wear 99." That's not a joke to me. If I'm the head coach, he's wearing 99 moving forward. So that's my hot team, the Florida Gators.
Well, I agree with you 100%. They're my team of the week. And one of the reasons why is actually Ruben Chinyelu. He has played phenomenal lately. So much talk about Thomas Houck, Alex Condon, but Chinyelu has really been a difference maker over the last couple of weeks. All right. On the not, now I'm going to temper this. On the not for now is Iowa State. I still am in, I'm all in. Chips are in on Iowa State for potentially being a top 4 line seed. But I think there's some concern right now, not losing at Kansas. That's going to happen. Of course, it's Kansas. It's Fog Allen. The Cincinnati loss really shocked me. I don't care if it's on the road. Cincinnati's been terrible. And, they lose by 9 there. They gave up 79 points. Like that's the way they lost, what they gave up. That's what shocked me in terms of Iowa State. And that's where I would have some real concern at this moment in time, snapshot in time with the Cyclones.
We know TJ Otzelberger will figure it out. I don't think there's such a shame in, losing a potential trap game to a struggling team at Cincinnati. I love picking desperate home teams. The fact that happened 5 days after they lost, not only just lost to Kansas, they were never in that game. That to me is the concern. Like you should have a better bounce back game than that. They're still a great defensive team, and even though their offensive efficiency numbers are there, they do have droughts on offense. And the longer you go through the league, the more you get scouted. So I think of the teams in our not category, we're the least concerned about the Cyclones, but definitely not a great week for them. You start off undefeated and you lose a couple of games. So I just want to give a word to our audience. Now that we're launching the HoopsHQ show, we're offering a great discount. How about 66% off an annual subscription for the year 2026, $20.26. You get an annual subscription. Go to hoopshq.com/subscribe. Enter the coupon code podcast. So again, that's hoopshq.com/subscribe. Enter the coupon code podcast for access to our sale. And we'll be back after this. Welcome back to the Hoops HQ show. NCAA made some news last week. It announced a change in the transfer portal for men's and women's basketball. The portal is not going to open until after the national championship game. The previous opening date was during the second week of the NCAA tournament leading into the Sweet 16. And also the window to enter the transfer portal is only 15 days long. Now that's only to enter the portal and declare that you want to transfer. Student athletes will still have until the first day of school to enroll in their next destination. So don't you worry. We're still going to have the long, protracted process to keep track of in the transfer portal. Andy, you wrote in your Katz's Corner column for Hoops HQ. You like this rule change. Why?
Yeah, I mean, it was really ridiculous that the window for entering the portal, originally it was like right after the season, and then that was only a year. Then they changed it to that second weekend. And I witnessed it with myself and covering the NCAA tournament the last couple of years, especially 2 years ago. I'm at the Sweet 16 Elite 8 in Boston, and we're waiting on the court for Brad Underwood to come out, Ryan Dutcher for the practice day. Where are they? Oh, they're in the back on Zoom trying to get players for the following season. They're about to coach the biggest game of the year at that particular time, and they have to worry about the portal. It was absolutely ridiculous that was going on during the tournament. The teams that might have ended their season late February or early March had this whole jump on getting into the transfer portal and working everything out. Will there be tampering? I'm sure there will be tampering. But the fact that you can't even enter it until after the Final Four really should allow the coaching staffs, for the most part, to focus on the task at hand, the most important thing, which is trying to win a national championship in that tournament. And it was all levels. I mean, I talked to Butler, head coach Thad Bond and their staff. They were at the Crown tournament, that new tournament last year in Vegas. The whole time they said, if they weren't practice or the game, they're in their hotel room Zooming for the following season. So it really made no sense that it was taking away from the best part of the year to try to look at next year. And I also would say this, like I can't speak to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss because he might have done that anyway. But I really think that Jay Lucas, because it was a head scratcher last year, but he leaves Duke. He's the essentially 1A top assistant, and they had a chance to win the national championship. We know they almost did. They got to within a whisker of the title game, but he leaves because the Miami job's open. Why does he leave during the that part of the year? Because he needs to get a jump on building a roster because the portal's open. Now, if the portal's not open, does that happen? It may not. Maybe he can at least finish what he started, which is trying to help Duke win a national championship. Players will at least be able to play through their postseason. Coaches will be able to coach during that time. And I think it was one of those times that every coach I talked to and read it in our column, they all are 100% in agreement that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, a lot of common sense in this rule change. I totally agree. The optics of all that were weird, and football has a big problem in this respect with its calendar. And so it's a lot to work out. Good move by the NCAA. The madness for transferring will start after the season is over, and Hoops HQ will cover it all. I'm trying to get as much sleep as I can because covering the transfer portal is a lot more work than even covering college basketball. We'll be back to wrap things up right after this. All right, welcome back to the Hoops HQ show. We're going to wrap things up with me and Andy Katz on what are we watching for. Andy, what are you watching for this week?
I'm watching this week if Nebraska continues this unbelievable run. I'm going to be there Wednesday night. I'm really looking forward to it. They're hosting Washington. It's kind of hoping Washington would at least maybe win one of the games at home against one of the Michigan schools. They're still very talented. But the Cornhuskers, undefeated, really, I think at this point, playing for a potential number one seed. It's kind of crazy, but they are. And the atmosphere in Lincoln has been off the charts. I've been there before, but obviously I haven't been there with them being this good and this highly ranked. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what it's like at this moment in time for one of the best stories in the sport right now.
Yeah, absolutely in line for a number one seed. I'm looking at Kentucky. Did we flush them too early? We may have. I think the uncertainty of Jalen Lowe, who was their point guard, transfer from Pittsburgh, dislocated his shoulder at the end of the preseason, and he was in and out. The shoulder would pop out. He would play well. He would not play well. They would hold him out, missed a ton of games. They have now said he's going to have surgery. His season is done. Even though they're better with him than without him, I think they're better without that uncertainty. It's also interesting that Jaden Quaintance, another great transfer, they knew he'd be in adjustment because he's coming off an ACL tear last February. He did not play in their last three games. Now, he was outstanding in the second half in that win over St. John's, best 20 minutes they played all season, but he did not play in their last three games as they're working through his knee issues. They won all three, including those great comebacks at LSU on the Christian Laettner play, Malachi Marino. By the way, LSU had someone on the ball, Rick Pitino, you're finally off the hook. And then a great comeback win in Knoxville at Tennessee, a Tennessee squad that had been ranked. So I think they may have turned a corner. You know, maybe they're not going to be as good as everybody thought, but at least they know who they have, who they are, and their schedule gets a little bit easier in the SEC. I think they got a chance to string together some wins. So that's going to do it for this very first episode of the Hoops HQ show. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Maybe you're first discovering Hoops HQ, the concept of Hoops HQ. We've got a great website that's been up and running now. We're in our second season at HoopsHQ.com. We cover college basketball in full. And I'll remind you to go over to HoopsHQ.com. Go to HoopsHQ.com/subscribe. Enter the coupon code podcast to get your first annual subscription, $20.26. So much to talk about, so much to cover. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on the Hoops HQ show. For Andy Katz, I'm Seth Davis. We'll see you next time.